Ask most consumers whether they value sustainability, social justice, and inclusion, and they'll say yes. But ask whether they consistently avoid fast fashion, shop mindfully, and carry out research into every brand they buy. And the answer is usually quite different. Vogue Business interviewed 25 consumers between the ages of 22 and 40. All but one said their values, ranging from inclusion and responsibility to animal welfare, play a role in the way they shop, yet most admitted they don't always shop according to them. The reason for this dissonance between values and behaviors often boils down to a combination of price, convenience, lack of sizing options, and, more broadly, a sense of disillusionment about the lack of progress towards sustainability. An excess of information and a world full of greenwashing and tokenism also make it hard for the consumer to know what to believe. While consumers are confused about how to shop their values, brands are equally confused about how to communicate theirs. Most brands have web pages committing to broad brush values such as sustainability or diversity, equity and inclusion, DE&I. But what's less clear is how they act on those values. Others are shying away from communicating theirs at all out of greenwashing or tokenism fears. How do we take the guesswork out of how to be a value-driven brand or consumer? Regulations will play a big role. Once the fashion industry becomes more regulated on sustainability, it won't be up to consumers to make the decision to buy better. Instead, it will become the standard for brands to structure their supply chains more responsibly and disclose their progress. Equally, anti-greenwashing legislation, such as the Green Claims Code in the UK, published in 2021, and the Green Claims Directive in the EU, which came into force this March under an 18-month transition phase, will make the parameters for communicating desired values much clearer for brands. The discrepancy between what consumers say and what they do is known as pick-and-mix ethics, says Kate Hardcastle, consumer specialist and founding partner at Insight with Passion. It's not as simple as consumers feeling the need to say the right thing publicly, then actually being quite wicked behind the scenes. There's more complexity to it, she says. The consumer is bombarded and engages with brands 24/7, and that communication can be warped and molded, sometimes by third parties and sometimes intentionally by companies, to suit a narrative. Many consumers understand a brand's unethical behavior, but purchase anyway. During a cost of living crisis, it's not easy or affordable purchasing on ethical basics because these are often understandably more costly. Gen Z are the biggest consumers of fashion, according to Mintel, with 27% having bought 5 or more pieces of fashion in the last quarter, rising to 36% among women aged 16 to 24. Mintel researchers also found that while 71% of women in the UK aged 16 to 24 say sustainability is important to them, 54% of those same shoppers have purchased from Shein. Important life phases, such as graduating from school, starting a career and having a child, are key predictors for changes in consumption, says Katia Dayan Vladimirova, senior lecturer at the University of Geneva and founder of the Sustainable Fashion Consumption Research Network. These changes in consumption are partly for practical reasons and partly because of the identity shift associated with these phases. One reason why consumers may not act on their values is a sense of their individual ineffectiveness, says chartered psychologist Dion Terrelonge, who specializes in fashion, well-being, and sustainability. The chaos in the world is driving people into a sense of hopelessness because they don't feel empowered to enact change that will make a difference, so they do the little things that benefit their well-being and give them a lift for a moment. Just as with essentials, one-off luxury purchases are often excluded from value-driven decision-making, says Damien Benders, general manager at digital media company Code Media, which helps brands connect with Black consumers. When you're considering luxury, a lot of decision-making factors are not related to your core morals, and instead relate to the zeitgeist, culture, and, particularly for the Black community and other communities of color. The idea that I've been excluded from this group and now I can afford it, he says. People from marginalized groups are more likely to feel affinity with brands that display strong values, and to boycott those that don't. Diasporic communities and communities from within fast-growing global markets, such as China, the Middle East, and India, are equally a focus. These consumers, particularly those of younger generations, are very savvy about the authenticity of brand D&I efforts, says Benders of Code Media. Community programs, whether supporting cultural events or scholarships with HBCUs, tend to resonate most meaningfully. But with legislation on the horizon, fashion brands will have to start being clearer about the responsibility of their supply chains, as well as how they talk about their responsible practices. To avoid greenwashing, some brands will continue to avoid labeling themselves as ethical and sustainable altogether. For brands that do want to label themselves by their values, transparency will become increasingly important. Pascal Brun, VP of Sustainability and D&I at Zalando, says the scrutiny that legislation will continue to pose in the future is a positive challenge that helps keep companies accountable to their commitments. In February, the retailer committed to revising its sustainability claims following an EU ruling that they were misleading. Helping consumers shop according to their values might mean exploring what fashion looks like beyond the production of new clothes, says academic Vladimirova. She points to business opportunities for repair services, peer-to-peer clothing exchange programs, rental services, and modular garments that can be updated over time. There are multiple ways for brands to be consistent with sustainability ideas and regulations, while still enhancing their revenue. But if we're speaking about the traditional model of produce, sell and forget about the rest. That model's going to have issues. Vogue Business did a great job focusing on all reasons that keeps our values far from our actions. Next step is to use this knowledge to improve our actions and choose wisely about our shopping.